Totally classic. Brendan McNamara.
Andy Swindler.
We are continuing the conversation. Can anyone be spiritual without being religious? Uh, we sort of started, I think, on opposite thumbs up, thumbs down in the first episode. We kind of got through a little bit of a sort of semantic exploration. And then I think we're having, as has been sort of hilarious. Actually, maybe you don't think this is hilarious. I think it's hilarious. This is my first question. I think it's hilarious how often we reach impasses and then we go, wait, what do you mean by blah, blah, blah? And I know I'm a semantic person, so this is why I'm gravitating towards it. But I feel like 85% of the time it's because we're using words to mean some completely different things. Um, have you noticed that? Like almost no matter what subject we talk about, at some point we realize we're using the same language but meaning something completely different. At
Yeah.
least that, yeah.
How often is that what pulls people apart, sadly?
Yeah, right. I mean, it's in fascinating ways. There's the biblical story that some may know, or maybe you just know it through its reference in the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Uh, that the Tower of Babel is this story in the Torah, also contained in obviously the Islamic and Mormon and Christian tradition. Anything that flowed out of Torah-centric moral thought, where humankind is building this grand tower to the heavens, trying to be like gods themselves, reach up all the way to the level of the divine, and they're sort of cursed or blessed, really depending on your POV, with divergent languages, like in an instant. So where they no longer can understand each other, and if they no longer can understand each other, the work. And this is fascinating too, because this speaks towards, I think, one of your life's work, Andy, is to bring together communities like in cohesive thought, cohesive intention, purity of personal intention, and then even like seeking a unified, eventually pure intention of building something together. But when you lose the ability to communicate, people who are working together can no longer work together because you lose. And I was like, we are fascinatingly in a time period, especially just within the English language, where um, what was it, Shaw, George Bernard Shaw was like said about the Americans and the English that we are two people divided by a common tongue.
Ah,
So we have that internally in the US right now, maybe throughout the West, where people we have like kind of entirely different dictionaries. Um, so when we looked at spiritual and religious in the dictionary, they were synonyms in thesaurus.com, Roget's thesaurus, Merriam-Webster thesaurus. And then at least I think we determined at least that like one cannot be religious and not spiritual. So like spiritual is like an inherent part of religion. You can't really remove that. So then the question is, can you be spiritual without religion? Do you think that's a fair assessment of kind of where we got to?
yes. Yeah. It's fine. I almost have this temptation to do a midway vote, but let's save it for the end.
Okay, okay,
Let's
okay.
let it build up.
Yes. And someone close to you actually, I thought provided the clue to how we can hop back in. You had said in a previous episode, although we were texting it, I don't know if we have the same memory of it, that you had negative connotations about religion in the past, that you weren't necessarily hold such now. And I think that's specifically how you phrase it, that you used to have, and then, but you no longer, and I think actually the way you said it was essentially that like religion simply doesn't resonate with you. So it's more of an, I was saying it's agnostic position or whatever towards religion, but that you previously had some negative associations. And then you were speaking to someone who's very close and near and dear to you, who had said, you had sort of asked them if they had essentially maybe the similar, like what they thought religion sort of meant, as an individual term. And they had said specifically something around, along the realms of, well, actually, I should have you explain it rather than paraphrasing you multiple times.
Yeah, they said, well, religion is a cult and spirituality is individual.
Okay.
And I'm reminded of one of the best definitions I've heard of what a cult is. A
Yeah.
mentor said to me years ago, and he said, um, pay attention to how they treat you when you try to leave.
Yes, I like that as the first. Yeah, I literally looked up like the top 10 recurrent themes of cult because I was like, oh, this is it. This could get us somewhere. But yeah, I think that's actually one of the. It's almost like too clever for its own good, but it is. I think it's pretty smart. Well, and that was fascinating to me. So a cult, again, this is similar to whatever, every parallelogram, like every square is a parallelogram, but not every parallelogram is a square. Or again, like anybody who is religious is claiming to be spiritual or interact with the spiritual. So every religious person is a spiritual person, but can the reverse? We're kind of trying to figure out the reverse can be true. Definitionally, cult would describe a subcohort of religion, meaning every cult is religious, but not every religion is a cult.
Hmm.
So that to me was fascinating as like an potential intercohort, um, almost like again maybe this hews towards like a negative connotation. And so I was like, when you had sent me that, I was like, oh, that's an interesting way to look at it. I feel like that's more connotation than denotation, which actually might be one of the great divisions of the modern world, where people are like, words are how they make me feel, not what they mean. Might even be like a huge divider.
Well, and it's fascinating too, just from my personal experience. I have experienced a lot of. Did we land on a term for, I don't know, organized religion, religion that owns land? Like I don't know.
Not really. Well, the problem is like they all do. Even the spiritual, what is it? I didn't even know it's an acronym. SBNS. I was like, oh, this is like an online term. Didn't even know, I guess maybe in literature. But like for example, the Fetzer Institute or whatever is a spiritual but not religious institute, and they own land and have, tens of millions of dollars or whatever. So like so every there really are, as far as I know, no even spiritual practices that don't have some affiliation or at least is practicing something,
Well,
similar,
maybe the
yeah, the big one.
major religions, or
Yeah, yeah, they're called, yeah, I think major religions is
okay,
fair.
we'll go with that. Just to sort of try to simplify this a little bit. So I have, and even some, I don't know, branches or less major like Sikh. But uh, it's so funny. I'm like, wait, is it sick? I
Seek,
know my
seek,
pronunciation was corrected, and I think I've
seek.
forgotten it already.
Yeah, I mean, most people say seek, but it is it looks like six is Sikh.
I think it was one of those things where like, yeah, everybody says it that way, but it's this other way.
Yeah,
Anyway,
yeah,
well, that's actually a good example. So I've actually typically had very good experiences, whether it was Christianity, Judaism, Sikh, uh, Baha'i, which is a younger religion, coming in and leaving and feeling very welcome to come back, but
yeah,
not even the tiniest hint of, oh my God, you can't leave. You must
yeah,
stay forever. Which I
yes,
think is
yes,
the implication there. And maybe this person who said that the other day had a different definition of cult. It's possible they were associating cult. Another definition of cult could be, oh, it's a bunch of people who sit around like zombies and just sort of, recite the same thing. And if that's true, well, that's kind of weird because this particular person is a really advanced yoga practitioner and will chant and
yeah.
so it's I don't know. So anyway, it is an interesting comment. It's a way into this. It's not something I hold by any definition of cult. Um,
Yeah, yeah. Well, that was interesting to me because I was like, my immediate response to that was, oh, okay, well, is that true? So this is the great thing. I think this is actually why, in many ways, I think between the two of our approaches, this is why I hope Totally Classic is helpful to people. Between the two of our approaches, I think it's a pretty broad, holistic approach. Meaning, like you are far more likely to go ask people what they think about things. Um, and then I'm much more ontologically focused, meaning like, okay, but is that great? Cool. We got the information. This is what people think, but is that true? Like, what was it? Someone was saying, so the other day, someone was like, oh, I was looking at the percentage of people, 68% of people believe that gender is determined at birth. There's no, it doesn't matter how many millions of people claim that, that's not true. Like gender, if gender is a social construct, it's applied much later than birth. And if gender is a biological fact that we put the word social construct of words onto, then it's determined at conception. So literally nobody's correct using that, but 68% of people agree to it. So then you're just like, oh, okay, well, that gives us a sense of consensus, but they're not correct in any way, shape, or form. So no matter what they're claiming, because then they're just claiming like a brand new thing. And so I think that's always my tendency. So my question was like, and it was fascinating to me too, because I think, as far as I know, the person your close person you talk to is kind of would probably consider themselves generally progressive, which I would contend meets. I looked up the 10 traits across multiple like published analyses of what define cults, and progressivism meets every single one of the 10. Because if you look at that, like try to leave, or what is it, the centralized authority, either a single leader or an inner circle whose authority is not meaningfully challengeable. And I think we've talked about in this thing, like every time you have stepped out and challenged progressive orthodoxy, the response has been cult like, meaning you're sort of like you were somehow in moral violation for challenging a conclude like a group held conclusion. Which again, I've argued with people. I don't know what I've challenged the goodness of God in Christian contexts. Some people don't like it, but I've never been like, you're a heretic. Like we're concerned for your soul. You bet you have to leave. This is immoral to even question. Who are you to question? That's how God responds in the Bible. He's like, who are you to question? But humans don't. So I was like, so it was fascinating to me, even just from the first, and literally every single one. Manipulation of language is part of it. What is it? Claim to exclusive truth. Our group has unique access to truth. Suppression of dissent, identity supremacy over individuality, information control, moral absolutism with selective application, emotional manipulation, fear, shame, love bombing, sacralization of the cause, punitive exit costs, which is what you were talking about, and then language capture are all like, here's what defines a cult. So if you
Mm.
had all of that within a religion, that's when you're like, oh, it's become cultic. Um,
I,
so
I think one,
I thought that was kind of fascinating. It's like, well, wait a second. So if it reframed, because I thought it was a negative association, but then I was like, well, but that person is progressive, and they're not saying cults are a bad thing. They're into cults. They're like cult doesn't equal bad. It just means that it's like progressivism. But we've already established that progressivism essentially, or woke, is a religion. So sort of modern 2020s progressivism functionally is religious. So then, or cultic specifically. So then I was like, oh, I don't know. I had to reframe, whatever. I try to constantly steel man whatever things I'm sort of seemingly in opposition to, so as to like make the strongest version, even if it's not what the person's saying. Um, but anyway, that's how I tried to rejigger that to make it make sense in my head. It's like,
you're like,
kind
I've already made your argument stronger, and I can still defeat it.
of, well, in general, I feel like that's a lot of the times. Like I try to, and of course, it gets me in trouble sometimes. People are like, I didn't even say that, and I was like, I know, but you can't claim what you're claiming. Like claiming spiritual and religion are somehow divorced is very hard to prove by the evidence. Meaning, like you can open a dictionary and be like, but it's not, and I didn't write this dictionary, and this isn't my cult's dictionary, but it's not your cult's dictionary either. Or actually, even Merriam-Webster, which is kind of the most progressive dictionary, they put them as synonyms. So then you're sort of like, well, like, are we probably in the realm of novel claim? Because it's been around. The spiritual but not religious claim has been around since the 60s, 1960s, and really probably even going back to the 1880s, 1890s with, what is it, theonomy, theosophy.
Well, one of those definitions really stands out because it,
Yeah,
you know, tags back some of our other conversations, which is that supremacy of truth.
yeah,
And that is, I think, related to, it's not the only reason why progressivism exists, but it shows up in a lot of places,
yeah,
and I've talked about that before, how like placing a bet on the minority position, because it not only does,
yeah,
it just feels good for most of it. I mean, it's an ego thing. It just feels good to be right. It feels good to be superior. It feels good
yeah,
to like level up, and having superior truth is a way to do that. I think
yeah.
it's one of the reasons why people love conspiracy theories. We talked about it at
Yes,
one point.
yeah, yeah,
Like, no, no, you don't understand. Like, I found the truth.
yeah,
So I think there's maybe a piece of that in play here. Um, I had remembered reading this article. It might have been 10, maybe even, I don't know, more than 10 years ago, about the rejection of, let's say, the major religions
Yeah.
being a form of privilege,
Mm.
and how across history a lot of communities, particularly marginalized communities, really needed their religion. It was their source of community, maybe even some in some cases for survival. And
Yeah.
it's what brought them together. And so I was reminded of that, and I didn't go that deep into it, but there is more information about it now.
Yeah.
It's not a radical thought.
No, it's
So I'm curious
fascinating.
how you think about that.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think it's skipping the most relevant way in which religion is beneficial to the marginalized into the like what's third or fourth most important, which is the gathering together element. Um, but first important, the reason it's important to the marginalized is because it provides the basis for moral claim. So, sans apodictic. Although it's not quite true, but it exists apodictically, meaning it is prior to reason. It is like an ipso. It is an existent thing, but we can reason from it and to it. Right. This is sort of this Greek idea, even of logos, which is pre-existent. Logic works because logic pre-exists, just like math works, which which precipitates function before apprehension of function. Same thing like science or whatever too. Gravity. You're like, well, gravity is a constant. Like it existed before we ever gave it the social construct of a name, that sort of thing. So marginalized communities specifically, anybody oppressed, how throughout all human history, the way to overcome oppression has been almost universally so an appeal to moral authority and the moral authority as superior to that of ethics, essentially, which we can get into the distinction of. So you can appeal to morals to override ethics. Like we've talked many times, Nazis were highly ethical people. You can't say they were unethical unless you're just examining by an ethic that they don't hold to. They were very ethical within their system of ethics of here's what's right and here's what's wrong. However, they were highly immoral because they violate essentially at some point all all moral principles. So that's why it's most important to anybody oppressed is you need a basis by which to overthrow power that isn't just more power, because if you are the minority claim you will never succeed. Like morals are the way in which might makes right, which is the natural state of all biology, all biological anything, is overcome. It's really what distinguishes humans as a concept, even
It's like
as
going
virtues.
above the Supreme Court. Like we need,
Yeah, exactly. Right.
yeah.
Yeah. If you go to the Supreme Court, because you go to the Constitution, right, which is again just an ethical framework which references morals, right, in our system. We hold these rights to be self evident, meaning we didn't create them. The law doesn't create them. So, anytime for us in the US, let's say a law violates the Constitution, you can go, well, hold on, you're not even keeping to your own ethics. This is unethical. However, if let's say the formal construct of the Constitution was itself immoral, you would then, like Martin Luther King, for example, got the 1964 and 65 civil rights acts moving because he was saying these are in violation of your own stated ethic that all men are created equal. So you have to apply your own ethic to not be an ethical hypocrite. But what the ethic was based on in the first place was a moral principle of the equality of humankind. So which has to pre-exist before any law can do it. So that's why minority communities, oppressed communities require it. So the privilege thing is fascinating too, because then the idea of spiritual but not religious is if you dig minority claims, there's no smaller minority claim than one person, than the minority of one making the claim. But this also provides us the like very tricky why it's a privilege thing. It was born in many ways from theosophy, which was built as a colonial justification construct. The whole idea of spiritual but not religious and being able to tap into like spirit guides comes from like much like race in the modern sense, was literally built to justify overriding marginalized communities' autonomy, moral autonomy, because it said, no, these savages have accidentally stumbled upon truth, but you don't need to go through all the methodologies of every indigenous religion on the planet. You can actually directly access the ascended masters of Hinduism. So they could colonize, they could go to India and say, listen, we not only have might makes right authority here, we have moral authority. We have consulted your ascended masters. and we have direct access to them. So the moral truth is you must submit to us by your own schema, right? So they took morals and turned them into personal ethics functionally. So that's the fascinating thing about this privilege thing is it's actually baked into the very concept because there's no religion or spiritual practice on the planet that has ever allowed unmediated individual access. Like it's a which again it's the appeal of the underdog because it's a minority claim universally, but it also like race is tricky. So they highlighted something that was true about community, but it's true even in the invention of the concept itself.
Yeah, and there were two other criticisms that stood out in that sort of zone, which one was spiritual consumerism.
Mm,
So how, where does this idea of
yeah,
spiritual intersect with capitalism
sure.
and where it's bite-sized and it's really piecemeal. So I'm gonna
Yeah,
take this course, I'm gonna
yeah,
work with this teacher, which is funny because like that's, I've stated recently that I built my own mystery school, and
yeah,
that's like a fun spiritual term to say, that I
yeah,
but thankfully I did go deep with a few teachers, so it wasn't just cobbled together.
yeah,
But yeah, I can imagine that criticism, and maybe it's in some way attached to this second piece, which is spiritual bypass, which more or less is like
mm,
I'm doing what feels good. So it's like, hey,
yeah,
I don't want to hear about your problems and your challenges. I'm over here meditating. That's what's gonna like help people. I'm
yeah,
not going to volunteer at the food pantry because I'm over here meditating, and that's actually, the
yeah,
thing.
yeah.
Which is funny because in my cases of actually volunteering, that's what really feels good. But
I know, isn't that fascinating? Right. This is the self-service difficulty with like act like conscience, like accurately perceiving conscience, acting conscientiously also provides sensual benefit because in general, like it feels good. If it feels good, do it is hedonism. And it's actually it's a being of low moral character. It's essentially what infants do. Like 1 to 2 years, but I suppose it peaks around 2 years old of like me, I say, this is what I say. And so without any external modification, that is pretty natural that people and even other biological entities pursue self gratification. And so there has to be some means of modifying it. Yeah, you've talked about your teachers too, which is some form of mediation. But that's fascinating too, because then within the system itself of religious but not, or spiritual but not religious, like mediation is not required. And in fact, in many ways, it's sort of like, hey, if you want to do that, that's cool. But the mediation is not operable. So I'm listen, the whole idea is very fascinating. I think to me, the fascinating thing is that like within the cohort that claims it, I've noticed a paucity of people being aware of how it was invented. It's a rare quote unquote practice, or let's just for right now, it still is it's a religion functionally by the what religion means in the dictionary. It's a religion founded specifically to justify colonialism, which is I don't know. Is that pretty unique? Like I don't know if any other religion was invented to do so. Meaning, have religions been weaponized and used to justify colonialism? Absolutely, every single one. Islam, I suppose, to a little bit was kind of like specifically a military. The whole first part of like Muhammad's writings are kind of pre-militaristic, but then once he started becoming an active general in military campaigns, it kind of altered the tone of the second half of his output. So that could be argued at least 50% of it was to justify conquering. Invented meaning as opposed to application. You know what I'm saying? Like we know the modern concept of race was invented in part to justify like continued colonization because race existed already for years and years and years and people were separated by color and all that stuff that was normal, but the specific concept that we refer to, you have to go, well, that was invented part in part for that. So that makes it pretty, I mean, it's pretty fascinating. And to me that's the actually have do you know within cohort, I feel like there's more spiritual but not religious people in the progressive cohort, but the progressive cohort is probably the most obsessed with colonialistic like power structures, but then they're following a spiritual or religious path that was founded as a colonial, like a pro-colonial effort, uniquely, like
yeah, I mean, if
in a
the
way that
question is, do so-called spiritual people understand where that came from? I would say by and large, probably not.
Yeah.
Uh, which echoes some of the other. I mean, we've talked endlessly about terminology like gender as a
Yeah.
more recent shift, or attempted shift
Yeah.
in the definition, and it may kind of fall into that pattern where it's like,
Yeah.
I mean, I would have guessed, I don't know, just loosely, like, I don't know, sort of mid 20th century, 60s, part of the
Hmm.
somehow tied up in the, hey, we're shaking off lots of old structures,
Yeah.
and so yeah, if the history, there's even some cognitive dissonance to name it as a thing, right?
Oh,
I think that's
interesting.
what
Yeah. Yeah.
spiritual people try to celebrate, is like, hey, you can't box me in, man. Like I'm not even part of the thing. You know,
Yeah. Yeah.
that's the whole point of it. Which maybe is a good time to bring in this definition again,
Yeah.
when for these definitions, not as some proof, but but to try to gauge what is happening in the populace. You know,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
like some kind of, I don't know, scientific consensus, but it's like, um, I did that on purpose. You're like, scientific consensus, that's not a thing. Uh, so anyway, so this is an article from Ohio State University's website, but I
Oh.
thought this did a decent job.
Yeah.
Religion is defined as the belief in and worship of a superhuman power or powers, especially a god or gods, and as a particular system of faith and worship. Religion tends to follow more specific or outlined rules, rituals, or traditions that members follow. Members of the same religion typically identify as a community. While people within the same religion can have different beliefs, they are related by common factors that the particular religion has to offer.
Yeah.
By contrast, spirituality is more difficult to define and is more abstract as far as practice and implementation. The dictionary definition of spirituality is the quality of being concerned with the human spirit or soul as opposed to material or physical things. Other definitions and interpretations include the personal quest for meaning of life, meaning in life, and anything involved in feeding the soul of the practicing person. So I don't know
Hmm.
if this is radically different. In fact, they even theoretically, supposedly quoted the dictionary. I don't know which one. But I think it was that in that first part where it was the religion tends to follow more specific, you know, rules, rituals,
Yeah.
traditions,
Yeah.
etc., which we already talked a bit about in the first episode.
Yeah. But that plays in exactly to my theory as I was trying to develop a taxonomy. Is I was like, I think the proposal is that spirituality, in trying to differentiate itself from spirituality prior, all prior use. It's trying to, so in that way, it's trying to colonize a term, but it's a colonization attempt on this indigenous territory of what spiritual means. Is It's religion without morality. It says it's essentially it's moral. It's postmodern. It's moral relativistic. Means so morals don't exist. So that's the way that's basically what it just described. Meaning, like, if there are no set boundaries, really, then morals don't exist. We're only operating in the realm of ethics or mores, cultural preferences. Oh, wait, and should I define that because we talked about that ahead of time?
You know, you kind of def explained it without defining it earlier, you
Oh,
know,
okay,
just as
okay.
you were kind of navigating different examples of morals and ethics.
Yeah, yeah. Morals are that which is. It's the is and ought, the why. Meaning, any ethical system can't just say, well, utilitarian ethics, for example, is like, well, whatever produces net benefit over net harm is ethical. Harm is not in and of itself good or bad. It has no, if morals don't exist, it has no moral quality. There's no right or wrong there. So harm, or at least some manner of harm, has to have a moral truth to base it on. And actually, you'd sent me a thing that I thought was super wacky, because it made the claim that Luca, which is sort of genomic, uh, the consistent characteristics of our genomic common ancestor across all, like, sort of biological, certainly mammalian creatures. But the person was writing about it as though it was an actual, like, ancestor, which is not even what the claim is. Luca
Oh,
is
I
just
bought the Luca crest. I have it hanging in my bedroom.
Oh, there you go. Yay. So, like, Luca is just here are the common features, right? Here's, let's say, five, right? Five common features. So the way, actually, since then, I was like, oh, this is a great construct to use to explain morals to people. So if you already know what Luca is, if you don't, look it up. Luca, capitalize it, ask your favorite chatbot or just whatever, look it up on DuckDuckGo, whatever your favorite is, and then start reading. Um, Morals exist like Luca exists, meaning you can look across all moral systems, not ethical, eliminate all ethical, just look at all the moral systems, and are there universals recurrent across every culture on the planet? And there are. There's about five to 10 really kind of, depending how sort of much you want to parse each individual one out. So for example, like truthful speech, or what is it, like unjustified harm. Those are two examples of universals, meaning all moral systems claim those, have to kind of claim those things as a priori wrong before we even start talking about it. And you can talk about why it's wrong in terms of like, you can reason it through and go, oh, okay, well, that was dishonesty disrupts trust, which disrupts cohesion, which disrupts survival, which you can ethically justify the moral pre-existing elements. But it seems like, and religion specifically is probably the dominant near exclusive means by which morals have been evaluated across all indigenous cultures, all religions on the planet, knowing that all people are indigenous somewhere. And all religions, well, there's a few syncretistic to religions, but the vast majority of religions developed from indigenous people, indigenous to the area in which the religion was born. So, um, that, and then ethics really are human constructs, in many ways reshuffling or applying moral principles through different lenses, like utilitarian ethics or care ethics or standpoint theory, right, which is more of like a supremacist, like whose suffering is most important, or even whose perspective on reality is most important, that sort of thing. White supremacy is an ethic, like not Nazism is an ethic. Um, but that's that. So I was like, maybe that's the good taxonomy, that what the Ohio State thing said, where it's like there are defined morals involved. So then my question is, without morals, then I guess yes, it wouldn't be a religion. But then is it even spirituality? How does it? How, without morals, how do you adjudicate whether something is hedonism and just doing what you feel versus how do you show that it benefits the human spirit or soul?
It's a very good question, which I've learned is something people say when they're trying to buy time to think.
I'm literally, we're literally just talking about the fundamental realities of the universe. So,
I'm like, my dad spent 50 years working on that, and people have spent a few thousand, but oh, let's give it a go.
yeah, let's see if we can finish it. We can fix it on a podcast.
The the thing, yeah, it's so fascinating, because this sort of direct, I guess, unmediated connection with a higher power,
Yeah,
it does. The voice sounds different, feels different. If I'm doing like a dialogue exercise, the way that wisdom comes through is very different. Now, I very well know that could just be some part of my psychology that is very wise, being like, "Hey, I'm going to sound like a god right now." Like, oh, cool, great,
yeah, yeah,
still useful. It,
absolutely.
um, but I couldn't. It's not. It's not explicit. There's no explicit moral framework that it's connected to. The
Yeah,
hope, the hope, I suppose, is that if you're for those of us who connect to that idea and have those dialogues, that it is implicitly moral because we're actually, channeling something that is based in those morals, that is literally the source of those morals.
yeah,
Um,
yeah,
but that's a big if, to
yeah,
adjudicate across an entire population. So
yeah, yeah.
that provides a hell of a lot of logic for like why religious structures and exist, even beyond just what we might believe about certain prophets, et cetera.
Absolutely. Yeah, yeah. Well, that's what I mean. This is how we know. I'm mostly what I'm talking about in terms of Luca is morals from an atheistic perspective, which means these are just the recurrent universals that it would be intellectual, ethical folly even to ignore, because all of our ethics are built on the fact that some of these things are bad, like harm is bad. Says
So
who?
I got it. So
Right.
these aren't like God gave us these morals. These are like, no, these are the moral foundations that are good for us as a species. That,
And
or
it defines,
even
but
good is a loaded word, right? But
yeah, even
yeah,
good. Yeah, exactly right. So it has to be good by what measure? And
yeah.
so all moral systems are like it's outside of ourselves. Almost all claim to divine, whether you're talking Navajo, Sioux, Aboriginal, Chinese, Japanese, Negro, caucasity, whatever. Like literally everybody is like essentially it is either the divine or the function of the divine. It's the religious concept, either divine or divine level, transcendent. And actually, in a lot of things, it's beyond the gods, meaning it's beyond Zeus, it's beyond all the gods of Hinduism. It's beyond all the Greek gods. It's or in Buddhism too. Like there's all these gods, but they're less able to become enlightened because they're so powerful. That sort of thing. It's beyond them. It's transcendent reality, which we all functionally know. Meaning, it prevailed across all cultures even before they intermingled. So it's like, all right, well, it's a constant, much like human beings require some form of oxygenation in order to survive. Okay, that's true. Yes, you need either oxygen pumped into your blood or you need to be breathing, like respiratory function. It's simply a thing. And so, wait, this is my question then to see if this is true, because in some ways this could sound insulting if people don't understand what we're talking about. That you're just like you just deny that morals exist ultimately in the format, in the claim. It removes morals, which is why you can see it be very dangerous for people who didn't have privilege to even pretend to practice. Because yes, not only are they excluded from community, but then they have nothing to reference to say this is wrong. You can never say anything is wrong that anyone does. So if someone wants to deport you as a citizen, you can't say that's wrong. You could say it's illegal or it's against my personal ethics, but your ethics don't determine what anyone else does, and nor do you actually believe you have the power to determine what anybody else does. But we all know things resonate for us, and then you're like, okay, but how do I figure out if my resonance is just I don't me no likey, and how do I know if it's real? So I was
And
asking,
that's really important. Like
yeah,
that's the whole attempt is to distinguish those and
yeah,
like spirit and ego, just to try
yeah,
to pick those apart is maybe central to both of, all of these, religion, spirituality. Like that's the deal, right?
yes, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I started talking about it yesterday as how do you make sure it's not ego with a halo?
Ooh, yeah.
Right. So then the question is, so can you, since you, I think you would call yourself generally maybe spiritual but not religious, or you can even speak for them. You can always say, I don't want to talk for them. Can you name a
I've often spoken for my cohort on this show, so I will do so.
Okay, yeah, yeah, and I can answer for Christians too, and just tell you where they're malarkey or not. Can you name a specific instance where your personal truth was in direct conflict with a moral principle, and you chose the principle specifically because it was more authoritative than your own conclusions?
Well, the truthful speech one leaps out. I mean, it's
Yeah,
that's that maybe that's my fascination with communication and conflict. And
yeah. So do
I
you
hope
don't?
in subtle ways, but I
Yeah,
don't buy that gets us off the hook. My personal mission is to speak truthfully, and
yeah,
I think it takes courage because
yes.
like Gabor talks about this, like the difference between authenticity and uh ex and he doesn't say assimilation, but it's in this context maybe closer to that. But basically, yeah, being part of the social construct.
Yeah, cooperation maybe or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. But so now is truthful speech the moral principle? Is that's in conflict with your truth? Meaning you don't hold that that's true. You don't
Oh,
hold
I
that
see
truth.
it. Maybe I misunderstood the question. I went immediately to action, like, oh, I don't always behave in that way, which is the human
Oh yeah, but
challenge,
that's yeah, no,
right?
no, oh,
So
yeah, we're
that's way
not.
downstream. You're saying like, are those in conflict?
Yeah, do you have any?
No, no, no.
Okay,
That's so
yeah,
I misheard the question. So those
yeah,
aren't in
yeah,
conflict.
yeah,
Those
yeah,
are
yeah,
in
yeah.
those are in like
Tension.
violent agreement. I'm like,
Yeah,
I
yeah,
don't know.
yeah. Well,
Weird.
that's what I thought. That's why I was a little surprised. I was like, well, I would think that was part of your personal ethic,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
personally, truthful speech. So that's what I'm saying. So that to me, that's a great illustration. I try to say it too simple, and I actually asked for one of the LLMs to help me phrase it in a way that's because I was like, what is something that you know is true but you don't believe is true? Is a good example of a moral.
Okay.
You know what I mean? Where it's like something that is true, whether I like it or not, whether I want to do it or not, whether I think that it's good or bad for me to do it or not. So there has to be some aspect of ego. That's where this ego gets most specifically surrendered.
Hmm.
Meaning, no matter what anyone around me says, social condemnation. We can look at the moral development Kohlberg stages at another time, but like everyone around me might agree to something. So then my fear of punishment is always going to be involved, or fear of lack of self satisfaction, which means my own ego is involved. And all moral systems, like both reincarnative and whatever, YOLO, the YOLO religions, all point towards the same thing, which is either you must surrender your ego completely, meaning release all attachment, even to right and wrong, or so yourself must be destroyed, essentially, or like just surrendered that you don't really matter in any way, shape, or form. Or in more YOLO religions, you must submit ultimately to transcendent authority, not human authority. Human authority is whenever they violate morals, that's when we go, hey, these laws are unjust, or hey, your culture is violating, you say women can't learn, you're violating the moral contract. It doesn't matter whether you're claiming it's religious or anything else. Like we can point to morality to defeat you or whatever. Um, so in that way, this maybe me in Ohio State and you have a right. Like spirituality is religion sans morality, and you can't really take morality out of religion without destroying what it is, because then it just becomes a cult, right? It becomes a cult or
Is it useful to say explicit morality? Because there's
no,
this
no, because morality has to be explicit,
right.
meaning
So that
yeah,
and that may be a really fascinating reveal because I think
yeah,
there's this idea with among spiritual folks, but we talked about this endlessly with progressives, right?
yeah,
And numerous cohorts that I think you've even said, well, everybody thinks they're doing good.
yeah, yeah,
Everybody
yeah,
thinks they're doing the better thing, you know.
yeah,
So the more the explicitity of the moral becomes quite important, so
yeah.
we
Well,
can
that's
actually
yeah.
name it and point to it. You know?
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's the differentiation. That's the difference between morals and ethics, really, is like one like is, and ethics can be modified. Like there's so many ethical systems, and some of them are in direct opposition to one another. Like it's not, and that we evaluate the morality of different ethical systems based on moral principles, not ethical principles. So if it can change, like for example, remember the teacher you were talking about? It's like, well, that's what the word means now. We don't know. Things change all the time. Things are constantly evolving. It may change again soon. But that's confusing morals with mores. And they're very similar words. They look very similar. But
Hmm.
mores is like social considerations, right? It was a accurate ethical more that Jews were subhuman in Nazi Germany, for example. It is generally accepted. It is biologically justified. It is ideologically motivated by kindness and compassion for the beleaguered, the common German Volk. So it has all the things, but it's not moral because it denies the equality of human beings, which is a moral claim that all moral systems have made. And in many ways, I think that's great. And honestly, like focusing on a moral commonalities is in many ways a great interfaith uh, concept, right? Because we go, okay, well, we always have to deal with the problem with every moral system also claims exclusivity. That's the big one of all of them. However, we do know we have multiple commonalities, but we live in a world, you and I, where like the United States is phenomenally immoral. And in many ways, like does just uses moral terminology very loosely for like, oh, it's you broke the law. That's wrong. Wait a second, says who? That's what are you talking about? That's you're using the wrong word. That's illegal. Illegal doesn't mean wrong. It can be wrong, but it doesn't mean de facto wrong. You know what I mean? So a lot of it's just sloppy semantics as far as I can tell, because I don't want to just be like, you suck. I was just like, no, you just literally don't know what you're talking about. But it's very easily discoverable, and it's never been more discoverable on the planet than now.
Well, and that makes religion, again, major religions,
Yeah,
far more interesting and palatable
yeah,
to me, even though I'm kind of in this neutral zone of like, hey, I actually dig it, you know. In
yeah,
fact, I've noticed lately I've yearned a bit for sitting with folks who are worshiping and being in community. There's a church, you know,
yeah,
three doors down, a
yeah,
Christian church. It's like, cool, maybe I'll go check it out. There's also a spiritual center down the street that
yeah,
I couldn't fucking tell you what they believe, you know, and it really, but
yeah,
I bet I'll feel super groovy there because I'm so immersed in, you know,
yeah.
the
It's
new agey spiritual stuff.
it's fun to meet
So,
people.
I mean, I might just do a little tour. I mean, there's
Yeah,
two synagogues like right over here, you know?
yeah,
So
yeah, yeah,
I might, and there's like a Buddhist temple over here too, I think.
yeah.
So I'm like,
Smorgasbord, baby.
that's fascinating. I'm gonna go on tour and just, you
Yeah,
know, see what's what. But this, you know, going back to the cult thing
yeah,
or it's like, what is the resistance? You know, why did we need to break off? I mean, obviously there's
yeah.
countless branches of every religion anyway, but
Yeah.
like, why did this need to emerge as a, maybe you're right, going back to the root of it, maybe that was more, I don't know, the word evil is coming up, but sinister
Yeah.
than those of us who chose that term know, in terms of intention. But even if it's not, why, what was the resistance? And I think
Yeah.
it was because I don't know that religion is usually presented this way.
Mm.
The major religions are usually like, here's our deities, here's our prophets, here's our scriptures,
Yeah.
here's the way to sit here and do it all.
Yeah.
And I mean, I don't know how many sermons you'd have to sit through to reveal that this is a way to really explore. Because if there's that much consistency with the moral foundations,
At least five of them.
at
Yeah.
least
5 to 10.
five,
Yeah.
uh, then it's like, then what's the problem? There's this funny like like, why is it so hard to live by those morals? And of course, that's the human dilemma because we're all
Yeah.
deeply imperfect, at the execution part.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's a way to remind ourselves of that, a way to explore. This one I always, for what I've read of the Bible, and I have been to a number of sermons, I love this. I love the parables. It's like
Yeah.
storytelling, right?
It's
Stories are
wisdom at the
the
very
best
least.
way to understand, to relate,
Yeah.
rather than some, I don't know. Certainly some people love academics, but I don't know that that's the majority. So,
Yeah. I like them
what
both.
I can offer two random musings on spirituality.
Yep.
I have an Evernote and I scribble down things, and I was sort of surprised to find these. So one is from 2017,
Hmm.
like 9 years ago, that spirituality is forming a tangible relationship with your existence.
Okay. Well, yeah, then that makes it specifically humanistic, meaning it's a form of self-exploration as opposed to moral, moral or spiritual even. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
On that level. It's like personal development.
Well, and that's really important because specifically in the what I learned, like with true purpose, it's very much entangled with personal development, all the way down to saying, no, we're not about the ego death thing. We're about
In,
developing our ego so
yeah,
it
integration.
works on
Yeah.
better behalf of morals, really.
Yeah.
But I don't know that we ever say it that way. Uh, and then the last was just about a year ago, 2025. Religion is a scaffolding for true spirituality and connection with the divine.
Hmm. That makes sense. I mean, I think that's probably that would be the classic supported across all time, meaning like it's the system that every culture on the planet has used to check whether your personal development is in alignment with moral truth and not just ethical truth, right? Because this every culture recognizes we're not going to get it right all the time. So we have to have some sort of safeguard as to like, okay, well, how do you know this is just your ego putting on a cool costume? And then, or even not an ego, but this is how your selfishness or avarice, is putting on a cool costume. Because we don't like that. I don't like it when religions do it. So then how do you determine? Those are pretty savvy. Let's vote. Let's final vote.
Let's do it.
I'm, can you be spiritual without being religious? I don't think you can, but I do. So I'm going to thumbs down still. But I'm going to say that, like, if nothing else, we're navigating a pathway by which one could make it a tenable proposal to explore, like a thesis to try to prove.
So this is a special day. This is a rare flip on Totally
Yep.
Classic, y'all.
Yeah.
I am gonna also thumbs down.
Woo.
Full reversal.
On a pretty fundamental one, folks. But you know how we did it? By finding common ground.
Well, and there's a really important part of this. We spent a lot of time talking about religion
Yep.
and the questions about being religious.
Yeah.
So if it was like, can anyone be spiritual without, joining a religion or naming a religion? That might be a little different.
Yep.
But, as you often bring us back to, certainly in the context of the dictionary definitions, that's pretty clear that they're more aligned than I thought. And I guess this part at the end is like, well, what's the point of this if not
Yeah.
reaching for those morals that those common morals that bring us together as humanity.
I would hope so. That's the in many ways that's our closest to the North Star. Well, thank you for helping me find the North Star, Andy.
Thank you. Love you.
Love you so much.